All right, Pike, here's a task. I just ask that it be executed as cleanly and exactly. Take a new gauge, set the reflex sight to 10 magnification, distance 850 meters, and fire half a magazine at the big boulder that looks like a giant's head, approximately 20 meters to my left. Understood? It was a clear order, no frills, the kind Darrow gave when his mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating risks like equations on a blackboard. He wasn't a fan of long explanations. Life in space taught you to be direct. Understood? Pike confirmed tersely, with that efficiency that made him the best partner in tight spots. May I ask what the jokes are about? I rarely joke about serious matters. I want to know how the miniature rocket projectiles perform. I'm primarily interested in impact force and explosive power. Start and pay close attention to how the recoil behaves under local gravity conditions. Absolutely no recoil, Pike stated calmly, as if reciting a manual he'd memorized on sleepless nights. Each projectile has its own propellant charge, according to rocket principle. No cartridge cases. The projectile and the primer part ways amicably. Muzzle velocity 240 meters per second. There can't be any recoil, a precise and safe shot. I've been thoroughly briefed. Handy. Darrow mocked, with that dry sarcasm that surfaced when he wanted to lighten the weight of what was coming. Start and don't mix me up with the boulder. Pike let out a short, sharp laugh, the kind that shatters tension like a hammer on glass. Gates watched in silence as Pike picked up the heavy weapon from the floor, that thing with a short stock and thick barrel that looked like it came from a workshop where engineers dreamed of efficient destruction. Darrow had been clear. No one left the Star Comet without a weapon, as if his instinct told him the moon wasn't as empty as it seemed. Max Pike planted himself in front of the half-assembled pressurized tent. About 30 meters away, the Star Comet towered into the lunar sky like an accusing finger. Carefully, he adjusted the reflex sight to 10 magnification, distance 850 meters. The red mark for the electrical ignition of the propellant lit up. The first projectile slid into the chamber. These new cartridges had a small caliber, 6 millimeters, long as a finger, but their explosive power promised to be brutal. Pike hesitated for an instant, the distant target in the illuminated sight, zooming closer, as if the moon itself were bringing it. "Go ahead," Darrow said demandingly, his voice a reminder that time didn't wait. "What are you waiting for? Imagine that interference transmitter is the one that screwed up our remote control." Well, Pike cursed aloud, feeling that internal click when the piece fit. The experiment was no longer a whim. It had sense, depth, like everything Darrow touched. The idea of a game evaporated, leaving only the weight of the reel. "For the first 10 rounds, I'll switch to single fire, with your permission," he declared tersely. "First, let's see how I do with the syringe." Agreed. Begin. Pike brought the stock to his shoulder. The boulder loomed large in the sight. Pike thought the distance was nothing for these projectiles, fast as thought. He barely needed to raise the sight. With the moon's low gravity, the trajectory would be almost straight. The sight was made for that. He could have fired for kilometers and still hit. Gates held his breath as Pike touched the contact. There was no noise. On Earth, it would have been a sharp whistle and a bang that left you deaf. Here the shot was a ghostly silence, as if the universe refused to acknowledge it. Only bright flames shot from the oval openings of the short barrel. They went out instantly. It seemed nothing had happened. Pike was bewildered, his heart beating hard in his airless chest. "Notice anything?" he asked breathlessly. "Damn, one has to get used to this weird way of shooting. I felt nothing." "But I did," came Darrow's dry reply. "Stone chips flew all the way here. The projectile was already here before you pulled the trigger. Incredibly fast. The boulder has a hole 30 centimeters wide and is deep. Quite something. That's a grenade. Try a long burst. The weapon fires accurately." Pike switched to continuous. The projectile exhaust flames dazzled him. From where Darrow observed, a bright whitish trail was visible, the solid propellants of those little demons. When they penetrated the darkness under the slope, they created a line of incandescent fire. The magazine was empty before Pike realized it. Little remained of the boulder. The lifted chips fell slowly, as in a dream where time stretches. Darrow had followed the silent explosions. Only flashes and flying rock. No shockwaves traveling through the vacuum. "That's enough," he declared in a tense voice. The one that came out when his mind was already calculating the next move. "The equipment department gave us a nice toy, gotta admit. How long did you hold the trigger, Pike?" "Maybe 2 seconds," Pike replied, astonished, feeling a new respect for that weapon that seemed from a mad workshop. "But the magazine is empty. Friend, 90 rounds in that instant." "Exactly. Rate of fire is 50 rounds per second. All right, experiment concluded. I'm coming down. Santini, how far along are you with the food?" "You could come. I've made an effort." Vince Darrow looked around one more time, absorbing the landscape as if searching for something his instinct told him was there, waiting. Then he slid down, long leaps covering crevices and uneven rocks with ease, like a man who had spent hours in simulators where gravity was just an adjustable number. 20 minutes later, he appeared in front of the pressurized tent. The airlock was mounted, the conditioner connected to the large unit of the star comet. Filling it cost several liters of liquid oxygen, explained Gates, with that voice that always carried a hint of practical concern, as if he were remembering budgets and supply lists. "Is it worth spending valuable gas like that? I wonder if we won't need it for controlling the star comet. Our supply is limited." Darrow stopped in front of him, standing tall, measuring the taller man by a few centimeters, with that gaze that weighed without judging. Gates out-tallied him, but in moments like this, it was Darrow who filled the space. "Gates, you're worrying about nothing. Repairing the landing strut needs skill and freedom of movement. I don't want to be wrapped in a spacesuit hammering molybdenum steel. And I also don't want to stand out in this yawning vacuum." Gates blinked towards the dark, improbably starry sky, as if imagining the weight of all that falling on them. "Just saying," he murmured, and a disheartened smile appeared on his lips, the kind that surfaced when he realized his doubts were more personal than practical. "You've been thinking about your return to Earth, haven't you?" Darrow asked calmly, without accusation, just acknowledging what everyone felt deep down. "About the baby, or no?" Gates pressed his lips together, the silence saying more than words. "All right, we understand. but you shouldn't dwell on it so much. Our planning is solid. We've chewed it to the bone. We won't make a reconnaissance flight until the star comet is in perfect condition. We can't risk a short takeoff with subsequent landing beyond the pole. The damaged telescopic strut wouldn't hold it. Sure, we could climb a few kilometers and, with a short maneuver, get into direct line of sight with Earth. But then we'd have to land again. In that case, the star comet could suffer damage so severe we couldn't fix it with what we have on board. In that situation, I would ask myself if spending oxygen on the tent is a luxury. Now we know. Clear? Darrow smiled impassively. That mask he used to maintain balance. Gates kept staring into space, as if seeking answers in the stars. Clear. Totally clear, he repeated, nodding, though his voice carried an echo of doubt. But another question is bugging me. Wouldn't it be better to launch now for the return? We made an emergency landing, right? Why bother repairing the strut? The landing on Earth is done with thrust. We'll land on the landing gear. Doesn't matter if a leg breaks on touchdown. We'll get down anyway. His gaze lowered, his eyes blinking, as if seeing something he didn't want to see. Darrow didn't lose patience, nor clarity. Only his tone became a bit sharper, barely perceptible, like a knife sharpening just enough. Gates, your idea is feasible, but it brings an unnecessary risk. Let me put it this way. We have a task here, and a cracked leg isn't going to tempt me to launch. Besides, his face became inscrutable, as if recalling a bad dream. Besides, I have this uneasy feeling we didn't end up here by chance. There's something to clarify first. Gates reacted instantly, his blue eyes apologizing without words. Pike started to smile. The matter seemed settled, as if the weight in the air had lightened a bit. All right, forget my words. Gates coughed, the burly man rubbing the back of his neck. It was just an idea. After eating, we'll look for the interference transmitter. I have the basic data. I'll feed it into the electronics later. I'm curious, Darrow nodded. All right, let's see what our doctor prepared. A disgruntled snort was heard in the helmets. Santini explained neatly why the culinary art, so simple for masters, was basically a domain of chemical processes. It sounded logical, but something didn't quite fit, as if he were trying to convince himself more than them. Darrow stopped in front of the landing zone, still warm, from residual radiation under the star comet's thrusters. Ahead hung the wide mesh basket of the extended winch. The long arm of the crane emerged from the open hatch of the cargo hold, right below the cabin. Darrow had avoided the folding rungs along the hull. For that, they would have had to pass under the separated legs, near the thruster, still emitting a subtle radioactive hum. Someone will have to forego the high jump for now, Darrow declared, with a forced smile. The kind that surfaced when he wanted to lighten up, but his mind was already on the next thing. His eyes sought the faces of the two men. Ah, Pike, be so kind as to stand guard outside for a while. I'll relieve you in half an hour. Up there on the slope is a good spot. Good visibility. We stay in contact by radio. Max Pike said nothing. Darrow's grave voice had told him enough. However calm the commander seemed on the outside, something was stirring within, an instinct that wouldn't be quieted. Before Pike left with his weapon ready, Darrow said in a drawn-out tone, "One question. Are you still thinking about that info that a manned rocket from the Asian Federation launched just before us?" "Caught it," Darrow confirmed, his eyebrows raised slightly. "It could be that someone wants to verify our accident in person.